Do you want to know all the sensory details at Peter Pan's flight at Disney World? Then this is a video for you. Hi, I'm Susan from Moms Make It Magical. If you're new here, I'm a mom of 3 kids and I share all the tips about doing Disney World and family travel with a highly sensitive child. Today, we're going to be talking all about Peter Pan's flight. When I was planning our first trip to Walt Disney World back in 2018, I spent a lot of time trying to decide which attractions we'd try or not based on my kids' sensitivities and triggers. So my hope is that videos like these will help you if you're in a similar boat as I was. So let's start with some basic ride information. Peter Pan's Flight is a classic Disney ride based on the 1953 film Peter Pan. The original version was an opening day attraction at Disneyland over in California in 1955. The Walt Disney World version opened on October 1st, 1971, which is when Magic Kingdom first started welcoming guests into its theme park. So it is located in the Fantasyland section of Magic Kingdom, which is a pretty big portion of Magic Kingdom. And let's zoom in a little bit closer to see exactly where Peter Pan's flight is. It is right there. I clicked on it and it's across the way from It's a Small World. It's also located right on the edge of Fantasyland, close to Liberty Square, where you can find Haunted Mansion. And this section here is where you'll find the Rapunzel-themed restrooms and an option for stroller parking. You can find Prince Charming Regal Carousel right there around the corner, which is right behind Cinderella Castle, which is what you see as soon as you enter the park. This is a slow-moving ride where you board a flying pirate ship over London and then to Neverland. These pirate ships are suspended from a rail on the ceiling to simulate the sense of flying. Peter Pan's flight is prone to long wait times, and it's kind of due to the combination of low ride capacity, which means the number of people on this ride at any given time is very low. There's also a slow loading time, and the nostalgia factor for a lot of people continues to make this a popular choice. One way to bypass the standby line is by purchasing Lightning Lane Multipass. This ride is included as one of the Tier 1 selections where you can reserve access to a Lightning Lane for this ride at Magic Kingdom. Keep in mind that if you do choose this ride, you can't choose the other ones in Tier 1 as a pre-selection. It can be a little confusing to understand the whole system, so I highly suggest watching YouTube videos about this. I really enjoyed Molly from Mammoth Club. Because it's a fairly gentle ride, there is no minimum height requirement, so infants and toddlers should be able to ride this without a problem. I often see this ride and It's a Small World being recommended as some of the best rides at Magic Kingdom for very young children, or for kids who scare easily and those who dislike typical thrill rides, but it might not always be the best fit for every family. So let's go through some of the attraction details and sensory factors to determine whether your highly sensitive child will enjoy Peter Pan's flight or if they'll totally hate it and freak out. We'll be covering these 10 sensory factors throughout this video, and let's start off with sudden noises. So sudden noises have a tendency to startle highly sensitive children since all of their senses tend to be more heightened. Peter Pan's flight does have some sudden noises throughout, such as a dog barking, drumming sounds, and distinct yelling and sort of boom sounds. I'll also note that near the end of the ride, you'll hear Captain Hook shouting, "Help me, Mr. Smee, help me!" But overall, it's really not too bad. Let's talk about noise level next, which I like to differentiate from sudden noises because noise level is more about the overall volume level, like how loud is the overall ride. And highly sensitive children are often more aware of the noise level no matter where they are. And I would say that Peter Pan's flight is fairly loud due to some of the sounds that I mentioned already, along with a constant background music. So the sounds overall aren't completely unpleasant, but the noise level could be uncomfortable for some highly sensitive kids. So Peter Pan's flight is all indoors, and I would consider this a very dark ride. It is not quite Space Mountain level dark, but it still is darker than other indoor rides like It's a Small World, for example, or even like Toy Story Mania over at Hollywood Studios. The whole premise of this ride is that you are flying through the night sky, so of course it kind of makes sense for it to be in the dark, but kids who have a fear of the dark may have a more difficult time on this ride. Bright and flashing lights can be borderline painful for some highly sensitive children, and even sudden transitions from dark to bright can also be bothersome, but luckily this is not an issue on Peter Pan's flight. The feeling of going fast can be exciting for some kids, but that is not always the case for some highly sensitive kids who tend to err on the side of caution. But thankfully, Peter Pan's flight is pretty slow and gentle, and because it is so slow moving, the wait times for this ride does tend to be quite high. There are a few instances of having like quick little turns as you fly about in your ship, but nothing super overwhelming. You won't be finding any drops on this ride like you would find on a true thrill ride like Tower of Terror, for example, or an actual roller coaster like Seven Dwarfs Mine Train. There is still a slight sensation of flying, which could make you feel like you might fall at any given time, but even those with a fear of heights should be able to tolerate this ride. So there isn't anything really overtly scary on Peter Pan's flight, but there are a few instances like here you see Wendy walking the plank of the pirate ship that could be a little bit scary. You'll see some glowing volcanoes, and then near the end of the ride you can see Captain Hook balancing precariously on the jaws of a green crocodile. It's mostly lighthearted and fun, but there are a few little parts that could be helpful to be aware of ahead of time just so that your kids know what to expect. This ride itself is great in terms of not getting super close to others. Each pirate ship typically seats about 2 people, although 1 adult and 2 small children can definitely fit as well. Our family of 5 usually splits up 3 and 2 into 2 ships. But I do want to make note that the queue itself, especially if you're waiting in standby, can be a little bit tight in places. There are a ton of fun details like what I'm showing you right now, but at the same time there are a lot of small dark hallways, and it can be really crowded at times, but the ride itself is fine. Disney is known for using the sense of smell to make their rides more immersive, but luckily for Peter Pan's flight, this shouldn't be too big of a problem if you have someone in your family that is sensitive to strong smells. I don't really recall any use of smells being used throughout this ride. Getting wet on attractions can be part of the fun, but that doesn't always hold true if you've got sensitive kids who hate the sensation of wet clothes or hate getting unexpectedly wet. But you do not have to worry about that on this ride, as there is absolutely no chance of getting wet on Peter Pan's flight. Now let's talk about the total score and my overall thoughts on this attraction. So the total I give this is 13 out of 50, and how we understand this rating is that a lower score means less sensory overload, while a higher score means a greater likelihood of being overwhelmed or overstimulated. Peter Pan's flight is a pretty gentle ride overall, and I would say it's fairly low on the thrill factor. It's also a quick ride. It's a very short duration, which means that even if your kid ends up hating it, it'll be over before you know it. So this is when ride duration really matters. For extra sensitive ears, I would highly suggest wearing earplugs or a pair of noise-canceling headphones to help with the overall noise. However, if your child hates the dark, you might consider avoiding this one. It is very dark through the queue, and the ride is pretty dark overall. As I mentioned, it is the sensation of flying through the night, so it is fairly dark. Another important consideration is if your child is scared of the sensation of flying or dislikes seeing villains, like Captain Hook, for example, you might want to skip it or have a game plan for how to help your child feel safe in those moments. I would also be extra mindful of that queue, especially if you're waiting in that standby line. The Lightning Lane line is much less sensory overload. So what has your experience been on Peter Pan's flight? Is it on your list of must-dos for your visit to Disney's Magic Kingdom? Join my private Facebook group to share your opinion and get more tips on planning your Disney trip with highly sensitive kids. And be sure to follow along with me on all the socials, Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest. I'll link everything in the description below. Let's keep making magical memories with our families.